That's good. All right, this first gentleman was a child actor. If you guys, I don't know if some of you guys are old enough to remember, in the 60s there was this thing on NBC called A Mall and the Night Visitors. Does anybody remember that? Some people do? Well, he played a mall. And he also was in the original Broadway cast of Hair. And he was in Jesus Christ Superstar on Broadway. And you saw Hair?
Yes.
Did you see Kurt in Hair?
Yes.
You did? Kurt, did you hear that? Oh my God, he says. All right. But in this film, he plays one of the dynamic duo, the high priests. He plays Annas. So you'll either love him or hate him. But from all the way from New York City, I know you're going to welcome him out. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Kurt Vaghjian walking down the aisle. What's happening, Kurt?
Thank you, Palm Desert.
All the way from New York City.
All the way.
Did you come in last night?
And yeah, flew in last night, but when I was 8 years old, I was living in Fresno. So I kind of know the heat scene here, although I've never been to the Palm Springs area, so this is a real thrill for me. Thanks for coming on.
Welcome.
Thank you, thank you.
Do you remember her from Hair?
You were in the show, right?
No, she was-
You got the hair done. You got the hair going on all night long.
It's longer and covered.
Oh, looking good.
All right, this next gentleman, he's part of the trifecta of Jesus Christ Superstar. He, along with Yvonne Elliman, were on the Brown album, the original record that Ian Gillan from Deep Purple was on. He was on the Broadway soundtrack, and he was in the film soundtrack. He's been directed by some of the greats in Hollywood. He was in Titanic, James Cameron. He was in The Shining, Stanley Kubrick. I don't know if you know that or not. He also reprised the role of Pilate in Italy last year on stage. And he is coming down the aisle right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Barry Denon. Welcome, Barry.
Is this on? Did you ever come down and meet an audience and have a piece of popcorn stuck right in? That's me tonight.
Don't fall.
Watch out.
There you
So
go.
old and rickety. Here we go.
And this next gentleman, I call the King of Rock Opera, because let's go down his credits. He was in Hair. He was in The Who's Tommy. He was in the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's on Broadway. He actually is in a brand new rock opera called The Devil's Carnival, Alleluia, that just opened up. It's being screened right now all over the country. But you guys know him as JC himself. So please welcome out, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ted Neeley. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you very much. Hello, folks.
Hey, look, it's Ted Neeley.
It's lovely to see you. Thank you for coming out today. We tried to make the weather a little cooler, but I wasn't in the line long enough to get a response.
Well, this is kind of like what you guys experienced when you were making this movie, right? Like 110 degrees?
Yeah. This is
We're going to talk about that.
It really is like being back on the set in Israel. It is. It's wonderful. Thank you.
We do this as a tradition at all these screenings. We've done about 80 of these things so far across the country. And we want to find out about, we're going to get to know the audience a little bit. So, show of hands, how many people here tonight have seen this movie, Jesus Christ Superstar?
1,000 times.
1,000 times. Okay, how many people here tonight have never seen Jesus Christ Superstar? And I can see some people who didn't.
Oh my goodness, that is one of the
But you haven't seen the
longest.
movie? Okay. All right. Well, you're in for a treat. The movie looks amazing. For 42 years old, the movie looks like it was made yesterday. It's a digital print, and you can't. It's better than the Blu-ray, so you can't watch it at home. You have to watch it in the movie theater. So, let's get started. Let's talk about the movie. Kurt, get us started. You talked about the heat. Where was this thing filmed? It's a Universal movie, Universal picture, but it wasn't filmed in Burbank. Tell us where you filmed this and a little bit about the conditions.
How we actually ended up there, I'm still not sure. That's the magic of Norman Jewison, because instead of deciding to shoot this movie on a back lot in Southern California, which, or here in Palm Desert, you could have found very similar kind of terrain, Norman was able to talk Universal into letting him take the entire cast in the middle of a war, in the middle of a very dangerous hot zone, to the Holy Lands. And we shot the film. We were based in Jerusalem for about six weeks, and then would travel out to the different desert locations where the priests said the scaffolding kind of erector set depiction of their temples, and then the temple where Teddy goes in and takes care of some business. And it was brutally hot. It's same as here, though, dry heat. We had to contend with what bothered me the most. I mean, I could handle the heat, but what bothered me the most were the flies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of flies in the desert.
And you can see them on screen, right? They jump on
Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah, on Thursday night. And so, and they would pick the most inopportune moments to fly in your mouth when you're singing. You'd have to cut the tape because it was brutal. They finally started smearing a bug repellent on our faces to try and get us through at least several shots without having to really wipe down again. Lots of Gatorade, and fortunately, I mean, they took good care of us. We had a great crew. We were in the Dead Sea area for a week with Herod's number, I mean, the lowest place on earth, and it was always...
And Herod's number is the only the sequence in the film that we actually built something for the movie. Everything else in the movie was just there, right? You just guys
Exactly.
just jumped on and did the film.
It sure
Yes,
was.
all of the sequences that you see, the sets were there. Mr. Jewison spent a lot of time before we went there to just scouting locations so that we would be able to see the reality, the historical reality of Israel. And the only thing that our company actually built was the moat upon which the Herod piece is done. And then they set that on the Dead Sea. The other thing that our crew had a lot to do with was the area where we have the Garden of Gethsemane, where we do the Last Supper. Well, the trees were all there, but there was no grass there at all. It was just sand and rocks.
Rock, yeah.
So several weeks prior to our going to that location, they went in and planted the seeds so that by the time we got there, we had that beautiful green grass to work on. And the one thing that was adorable about that is they didn't think about, by putting the grass there, that it was going to create a problem with the local sheep.
The Bedouin shepherds who would just travel through that area every couple of days.
Yeah, and from north, south, east, west, whatever, they all would go through that area on the way to where they could find grazing land for the flocks. And so we had a bit of a problem because, of course, the sheep saw that and they wanted to hang out a bit, you see. So they actually made an arrangement with all of the shepherds who were constantly going through there that once we finished shooting the sequence, they could dine as long as they would like. And that's why, at the end of the Last Supper, when Carl and I have our confrontation and then he runs away, that's why he has a tough time getting through that herd of sheep, because they didn't want to leave, because they've been standing in line so long, you see, for their tickets to the grass. So those little things happened all the time that we didn't plan, and it was a wonderful experience.
And Barry, did you have any time between shooting to go out and explore a little bit in Jerusalem? Did you walk in any places down there, historical locations?
Well, yeah, I did have some time off while I was there. I remember I was there with my ex-wife, and we had a week or so, maybe 10 days off, and she decided to go to a monastery where we slept in cells. Cold, dark, damp cells.
You loved it, huh?
Oh, it was wonderful. So sunny and bright. But yeah, no, it was, what was the question?
Did you get a chance to explore some of the Jerusalem sites while you were there?
Well,
Didn't
I
you
went
walk
in-
down where Jesus walked, the steps and stuff?
Yes, you can walk the Villa Dolorosa, which is probably a mud path in those days. But now it's a rough set of steps with as I remember, close walls on each side.
yes.
And there are plaques along the way, these sort of tiles that tell you, at this point Jesus fell. At this point the fellow helped him up. At this point, and it's very moving. It really is until you get to the top where he was crucified. The other thing I did do is get to the Garden of Gethsemane. It's not at all what you would think. It's a small plot of olive trees. There's nothing on the ground. It's just scrub, and yet it's oddly moving. And I remember looking around this place, and I thought, oh, Lord. And I looked across, and there's a big gulf, I guess, where there's traffic or something. But on the other side, Jerusalem rises up. And because it's so hot there, the air shimmers. And I remember looking at the buildings, and it looked like they were vibrating with life. It was an amazing, weird, beautiful, wonderful, scary place.
Tell them a little bit about after shooting one scene, or when you're turning in one night, you're going back to your hotel or something, and you saw. What did you see?
Well, the nights in Israel and where we were very, very dark. I mean, the minute it got dark, it got dark.
Yeah, there were no street lights.
No, there was nothing. There were no street lights. There were no candles. There was nothing. And I remember having flashlights and things so we didn't fall over rocks. But one night I was coming home. I was alone, and I noticed some bright lights up ahead. And as I got closer, I realized it was a caged-in, sort of like a tennis court, except all the guys, all the apostles, and Jesus Christ were playing volleyball. And they were all, it seemed to me at the time that they were all in white for some reason. And they were all, running around and screaming. I thought, how often do you get to see Jesus Christ playing volleyball? It was, I really stood there with my mouth agape for a long, long time. This is gorgeous. This is one of the most stunning, beautiful, moving things I've ever seen. And then I turned and went home.
But on this documentary that's coming out, there's some great footage of these guys behind the scenes, preparing, doing takes and stuff like that. The one thing I want to, these screenings are tributes to one man who can't be here, and that's the man who played Judas in this film, Carl Anderson. Let's hear it for Carl Anderson.
Carl!
When this documentary comes out for Christmas, when you see it, there is a sequence in the documentary behind where you are playing tackle football with Carl. Did you have time? I mean, is that how you spent your time between takes and stuff? What did you guys do?
Honestly, time was so precious because we were on a tight shooting schedule. So when we did have a few moments, we tried to get as far away as we could just to give ourselves a break. And everybody, being from America, we played a little tag football every once in a while, and then we got into beyond touch. We got into being tough guys and tackling, big deal, tough guy. So
There is some footage of that.
There's a sequence that's in this documentary that we will have ready for them, because it's being edited and put together as a sequence of us actually in a game. And my team is on the right, and his team is on the left, and we kick off the ball, and we're all going down there to get it. And it was kicked off to us, and one of the apostles caught the thing, and he's running back, and he starts to get tackled, and he laterals to somebody, and then that person passes it to one of our guys down. Well, Carl intercepts the ball. And Carl started, and he was really fast. Carl was very agile. And he was running, and scouting around everybody, everybody got near him, but nobody tackled him until he came near to me, you see. And I jumped on him from behind and pulled him to the ground, and the person who shot this particular sequence froze frame just as the two of us hit the ground, head first, feet in the air, me on top of Carl. It was a surprise ending for all of us because we didn't know anybody was shooting it.
It was a good tackle too.
Yeah.
You didn't see that. When was the first time you actually saw that footage?
Actually, whenever we were in Israel, there was a gentleman there shooting footage of almost everything we did on set. And then when I got the opportunity to go to Italy in February of last year, 2014, the lady who was a dear friend of that person was a journalist, and she came and interviewed me, and she said, Mr. Neeley, I'm fully aware of some footage that was shot when you were making the film that you might be happy to see. And she got us copies and sent it. We'd never seen it.
Never seen it
Didn't know
before.
it existed. It's absolutely gorgeous. She interviews Norman Jewison, and some things that Norman had to say about the process is just so moving. It'll make you cry to hear him talk about casting and putting us all together and making it work. So we're making a documentary of that as the creation of the film and the creation of what we're doing at this point in time, and it will be available. It's wonderful. Moments that we didn't know existed. It's great.
Kurt, what's your favorite sequence in the movie?
Well, I mean, one of my favorite numbers visually, just watching the movie, is Simon's number. Larry just knocks it out of the park. But when we were there shooting, when we were filming, we were fortunate. The Priests, they wrote a number for the film that had never been in the Broadway show or on the album. Then we are decided, and we got to shoot in one of Herod's palaces, Herodian, and it was. I was supposed to come up this road with a lantern, and they had tried it with a candle and just wasn't bright enough, so they wired a battery on my back and a wire down my arm, put some gel in there with a brighter bulb, but it got the bulb on fire. But I mean, the bulb caught the gel on fire, and I couldn't let it go. But the crew, as Ted will tell you, we had the best crew, and they took really good care of us, because it was treacherous terrain. I mean, when you see some of the dance numbers, they would go out and sweep the desert, but still these kids had to dance on rocks, hard rocks and stones, and they were wearing hippie moccasins, I mean, that's what we were wearing.
Sandals.
And sandals. It was, the dancers worked hard. The dancers always work the hardest.
Barry, what's your favorite sequence in the movie?
Mine?
Yours.
Oh, well, the sequence I'm most proud of is the sequence where the first time you see me after the dream, actually, the second sequence in the film, where I'm standing way, way up on a rock prominence. Yeah, and I remember I was wearing these very tall shoes. I'm short. I'm really short. I'm 5 foot. And I talked to Tom O'Horgan, who directed us on Broadway, into getting us these great big cork shoes. Yeah,
Platforms.
Yeah, and actually it started a craze. People were wearing wedgie shoes. I don't know if you remember that, but we had shoes that were like really, really tall. I thought in the movie, I'm just going to be this little dwarf guy running around. So I talked them into letting me have the okay. So my first scene was way up this tiny little trail. There was no handrail. There were no steps. There was no nothing except a sheer fall.
A goat path.
A
It
goat
was
path.
a goat path that you got.
Yeah, and even the goats had trouble. But, okay, so I was supposed to walk up there and take my place. Well, I got sort of a third of the way up, halfway up, and I froze, and I thought, I am going to fall to my death before I actually get to film anything.
Barry, you took about 3 steps and you said, no, I can't do this.
So, he's probably right. And it was scary, especially in those shoes, those clomper shoes. So this big, strong, muscular grip, we had an English class. He said, "Never mind, Barry, held on." He flung me over his shoulder, schlepped me up the steps, over, seeing the ground get further and further away, and he plonked me down on the edge. There was no guardrail, there was no nothing. There I was, standing there.
Treacherous.
It was scary, it was really scary. And I was way up there, and the camera was way down there with Norman. And I remember Norman looked up at me and said, "Barry, get closer to the edge." So I went a little bit closer. Closer! I got a little bit closer. Just a little bit closer! So I did, and I looked down and I thought, don't look down. Don't look down. And Norman just went, action! And we started, the playback started, and I just watched Teddy being dragged through the desert by these guards. And I thought, don't you dare fall. Don't you even blink, Just stand down there, you know this, you know the character, look at him. You know, who the hell is this guy? And I live to tell about it.
It's a great shot.
Great shot. Now, in the feature today, you'll see what he's talking about, because it's whenever they're taking me for the trial, and it's the first time that I meet him, so to speak, and they're actually carrying me or dragging me in toward him, and in the distance you see this where he's standing. It's the ruins of a palace or something, a temple that was on a hill. And all you can see in the distance is this shadow, this little shadow on top of this ruin. It's enormous. And then they do a shot and you see him looking over, you know, as if he controls the world. So you can see exactly what he's talking about. His life was in danger the whole time.
Now, it's funny though.
Now, Ted, by the way, all three of these guys are on social media. If you guys are on Facebook and Twitter, these guys check their Facebooks all the time. But on Facebook, all the fans always want to mention and talk about Gethsemane, your scene in the film. Tell us a little bit about the sequence of Gethsemane and making that, and you know, the playback, and you know, because you're walking up this hill singing. Tell us a little bit about Gethsemane.
Are you aware of the scene he's talking about?
Yes.
Was I involved with that?
Yes.
That's what you told me.
To this day, it's still a moving experience to remember, because Norman wanted it to look as if Jesus of Nazareth was having a conversation with his father. And that's exactly what we hoped to present. And trying to get closer and closer and closer with each moment of the passing song, and therefore climbing the hill while we were doing it. And it was really an extremely deep spiritual experience just doing the moment. Because keep in mind, excuse me, each time the moment changes to, I'm just coming around a couple of stones, and then I'm going to go to another. They had to stop, move all the cameras up the hill, and then start again.
And they had to move the speakers too. They would move those big speakers.
And mind you, being rockers like we were used to some volume with our music, you see. So there was a crew there not only for the camera, for all the technical elements, but a separate crew whose job was just to move the speakers around each one of us, because Carl and I had to have our rock music there to do our thing too, you see. So they were carrying all their equipment as well. And the thing about it was continuity was really the most important thing, to make sure that you do just one line, just an 8-bar phrase, and then you stop, then you got to plug back in with the intensity you were using before to bridge that into the next moment. And Norman Jewison was the most patient, most helpful, most inspirational human being in the world with all of us. Never once got upset with us, never once made us feel like we didn't know what we were doing. Always supportive, always encouraging. And it was an education. It was like going to college just for that moment, for that song. And it still to this day is the most moving experience I've ever known in my life. And I'm talking about when I get to do it live. I'm not talking about watching the film. I'm talking about what Tim Rice and Andrew Lloyd Webber did when they wrote that song. All of the music in this piece, but specifically that song from a purely one-on-one conversational point of view. And what I used for my inspiration was literally my childhood. And when I was growing up, any time I had questions in life, I would talk to my mother or my father, and we would talk, and they would give me advice and suggestions and support, always support, never always support, nurturing. So that's what I was using from an acting point of view to express that, because who of us knows what Jesus might say if he were talking to God? So we had the dialogue that Tim wrote, brilliant dialogue. We had the magnificent music that Andrew wrote to accompany that dialogue. But still we had to find a way to interpret that in an honest human point of view, because it's about the last 7 days in the life of the man called Jesus of Nazareth, as seen through the eyes of his contemporaries. The man called Jesus of Nazareth. Not challenging the deity at all. Absolutely acceptance of the Son of God, the divine triangle, all of that. But the idea is this is in the last 7 days before he's crucified and before resurrection. So no one knew he was more than an outspoken person. So that was always being reminded. So it was good in a way that we had to stop after each phrase and change the location to help me be reminded that, you know, you're the man. You are the man, Jesus of Nazareth, singing and talking to his Father. What an experience. And it grows more with every performance I get to do. I've done well over 5,000 performances of this. And I've almost learned the words.
You're really starting to get it today. You're going to be in Amsterdam for Christmas, right? Performing live.
Yes, yes.
So if you know anybody in Holland, let them know.
Tell your
Get some
friends.
tickets.
So what I'm saying is the inspirational elements that we felt with every sequence we all shot is apparent when we see this movie. And now that we can see it up on the big screen in digital process, it's more clear now than it ever has been before. We're still seeing it as this group of people.
When you see the terrain, it is just unbelievable. It pops so much, and it really takes you there. You'll see the flies, you'll see the rodents and the birds and everything just crawling all around. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere, and it was really one of the most special moments of my life.
And we're still seeing it, honestly, as the young people who were blessed with an opportunity to be in this magnificent film. That'll never change. But being able to see it in such clarity, the way it is now, we can certainly feel the spiritual content and relate to how those of you who are kind enough to still be appreciative of this work feel. So we feel that spiritual circle with you, and it is absolutely magnificent.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of you who've seen the movie 1,000 times, somebody
Yes,
said right
that
here,
was me.
we're going to do a little something different at the end. You know, at the end of the movie when the credits roll, it's like dead silence. There's nothing going on there. What we do at all these screenings is when the credits roll, we play a bootleg tape of Carl Anderson singing Superstar from 1997 in a live performance, which turned out, this was in Philadelphia, and it turned out to be the last time you two guys performed together on stage. So we're going to play that, so stay in your seats when the credits start rolling. We'll put that on the speakers. Should we watch the movie?
Well, I
Yeah.
love that, but somebody was raising her hand.
You guys,
I just had one question or one input. Since you all are in a reunion, there's a place here in the valley in the desert, and it has it's a beautiful garden at Date Shield's Garden. If none of you have been there while you are all in town, I highly suggest that you go to the garden at Date Shield's in Indio. It's borderline La Quinta and Indio, and they have a grand garden, acreage, a garden of Jesus, and in a Jewish kind of, well, it's you will feel like you're in Israel when you go there. So I highly suggest that all of you go there if you can while you're here in the desert. It's a short trip away.
And she said all of that with this beautiful little puppy.
This is Rainbow.
Hi, Rainbow.
Oh.
Oh, you're yawning.